Is that good? About right distance? Okay. I don't know what to do with this thing. All right, clock shows it's time to get started. We do have some visits we want to give out before we start class. Just raise your hand and we'll pass these out. We got one for Don and Peggy Watson. Okay. Mary Alice Grimes. Dave and Betty. Dave and Betty are still at Corpus with their grandbaby. Larry and Carolyn King. Dave's here. Hey, I guess you're not at Corpus then. Kim and Nayadine. Vernon and Noby Patterson. Good morning. Yvonne's here. Evelyn Phillips. Evelyn Phillips. Nadine Tunnel. I'm moving fast. Nadine. Heidi Landis. Wayne Pylan. Is that tomorrow he's having surgery? Okay. I thought he might have already had it done. I thought it was close. Juanice Young. Jason Merciers. Jeff Beam. Did Jeff get to come home or do we know? Jeff's suffering with severe cancer at this time, so keep him in your prayers. It seems awful loud. Guess I need to be loud, huh? Okay, before we get started, is there anyone we need to remember in our prayers this morning? I know Jeff for sure. We'll put Jim. Jeff and Heidi. Okay. Amy? Okay. Ussery? She's having tests, though? Okay.
Yeah, they're going to do an angioplasty tomorrow.
Edmund's family?
I have a coworker, Stormy Matthews.
Stormy Matthews?
Stage 4 cancer. She's young, has a husband.
Okay. Stormy Matthews has cancer and co-worker? Okay.
A lady over at where my mom is in the assisted living center, her really best friend over there, and Pam and Joe and Glenda know her real well too. I don't know her last name. Everybody calls her Mama Joe.
Mama Joe?
Yeah. Joe, what's Mama Joe?
Last name's Reagan?
Reagan. Joe. Okay. Yeah, well, everybody
Joe Reagan?
Mama Joe. She's in the hospital now.
Okay. Okay. Yes, ma'am. Okay. Norma's saying when you say a name, make sure she gets the address, name and address, so she can follow up. Okay. Okay. Let's pray together, please. Dear Heavenly Father, we're thankful for a beautiful spring day that you've blessed us with today, and we're thankful for the changing of the season, the beauty of your creation that comes back to life each spring. We're thankful for the privilege of being here today to look into your word and study and worship you today. We'd ask in a special way that you be with those that we've mentioned today and that we are on our minds. We ask that you especially be with Jeff as he's facing a serious cancer diagnosis at this time. Bless him with good health and good spirits that he might fight that disease. Be with Heidi, give her peace and comfort while she's in the hospital. May she recover speedily and be back with us. We'd ask that you be with Amy Ussery as she's dealing with some health issues this time. Bless her with good health and your providential hand be on her. We'd ask that you be with Joe Reagan this time. She's in the hospital. Bless her with good health, and may the doctors do the things that need to be done for her benefit. Be also with Stormy Matthews at this time as she's facing some difficulties of health. Bless her with a speedy recovery if it be your will. We'd ask that you be with the Edmonds family and the great loss that they've lost in the last few weeks, and we ask you bless them with comfort, knowing that she was a wonderful Christian woman. We'd ask that you help us all to live our lives as Christians. Give us courage, give us understanding of the things that are going on around us, and help us to make proper decisions. We ask all these things through your Son's name. Amen. Steve's out of town today, so I'm steering this cruise ship for today. So y'all don't let me run into the rocks or hit an iceberg or anything like that, and we'll be good. So we're going to talk a little bit today about trials. And we're not talking about a legal trial. And some of us have been through trials before physically, in the legal system. But we're going to talk today about trials which we have to endure while we're alive. And, many of us, I would say in a room this size, and as just by our prayer list, we know that there are many trials that all of us are going through. Now, if you ask a group, you say, is there anybody going through a trial right now? What's the answer? Definitely. I mean, there's a lot of that going on. And if you say you've never been through a trial, you're probably either real, what's the word? Lucky. Very lucky. Or you're super optimistic. Am I right? We all go through trials, and we all have problems that come our way. And even some of us in this room may be going through multiple trials right now. I mean, it seems like things, what's that old saying, when it rains, it pours? It seems like that's the way things go sometimes. You might have a family issue and a health issue and a financial issue, and they just seem like they just keep coming. And these are hard times that we have to get through. Now, when did trials begin? When did difficulties start? Garden of Eden. Okay? Now, Genesis chapter 3 kind of details that on what happened. And you kind of know the story of Adam and Eve, and they had this perfect place. God said, here you go, here, take care of this. And what was the only thing they couldn't do? Just don't touch that tree that I'm saying. Stay away from it. I think he even said don't even look at it. Just stay away from it. Well, I don't know. We kind of give them a bad rap because we say, well, that's all you had to not do is just leave that tree alone. And what did they have to do? They had to go. I can see, Eve kind of standing over there by the, she probably didn't just run up there on the first day, did she? Whoop, yeah, here we go, I'm going to grab that. No, it took some time, didn't she? She had to ease into it, didn't she? She believed a lie. Satan gave her the lie and said, oh no, you'll be wise like God if you eat that fruit. But I can just see her standing over there close to that tree, kind of, just walking by one day. Oh, that tree is really nice looking. And man, look at that fruit on that thing. And I just really would like to, and then she's probably over kind of maybe, leaning on it or something. And, oh, this is really good right here. This is a good shade spot right here. I got the whole garden, but I got to be over here by this tree. And you can just see the process of just, the way we deal with sin and the way we kind of like to get close to it. Like I say, the Bible leaves a lot for our imaginations open there on how all that went down. But it just frustrates me to think, why didn't they just leave that alone? Troubles began because of the sin in the garden. Now, again, we give them a bad rap, but don't we do that same thing? I mean, I just think, how easy would that be just to stay away from that tree? I'd just go on the other side and hang out over there. Well, we don't do that, do we? When the Bible teaches us and God says, just don't go to that place. Don't say that. All you got to do is just don't say that. But what? We got to say it. We got to say what we know we shouldn't be saying. And we've got to go see what we know we shouldn't be seeing. And we got to have attitudes that we know we shouldn't have. And it's a constant battle, isn't it? You know, if Adam and Eve hadn't failed, we'd have been right there to pick it up, wouldn't we? We'd have been right there, and we'd have messed it up. Somebody would have come along and messed it up. It's just the way we do things.
Adam and Eve never saw any retribution from God up until that time. We have tons of examples where God punished his children and people, but they'd never seen that. So,
Scott's point is, he said, you know, they had never seen retribution from God or a punishment for something they had done wrong. They didn't know what that was about. It's kind of like, that reminds me of the story when Cole was a little bitty guy. We was trying to keep a dog in before we got our fence put around the backyard, and so I said, well, I got to keep that dog from running all over the neighborhood. So I put me up a little electric fence. Okay, so you know where this is going, right? Cole, he's about that big, just watering, you know, going around. And I told him, I said, Cole, don't touch that fence. It'll shock you. Well, I thought about it afterwards of the fact that, you know, where the story went. One day he was out in the backyard messing around, and the fence was over a ways from him, but he got around there and touched that fence. You know, just a little bitty wire. And, you know, it's not going to kill him, but he felt it. If you've ever got up against an electric fence, you know what I'm talking about. Well, I heard him screaming, and I was like, the first thing went in my head, he got that electric fence. So I run out the back door, and he's leaning over against the house like this. Tears are just flowing, you know, and I said, did you get into that electric fence? Uh-huh. Well, and after the fact, I remember thinking, he don't know what shock means, did I? You know, I emphasize it, Cole, don't get next to that fence, it'll shock you. I don't know, what does shock mean? I don't, you know. So, and maybe that's kind of the same thing Scott's talking about. They had never felt that retribution. And to understand, now God said, I remember as a kid, I remember thinking, God said, you eat that tree, you're going to die. And I remember as a kid, you remember thinking, well, they didn't die. No, they did die, didn't they? What is death? It's a separation. You know, death of our body is a separation between the spirit and the body. And death, when it comes to God, is a separation from God. I'm separated from Him. That was death to them. And that's when trouble started. That's when trials started. He said, I gave you this great place, but now you're going to have to work. You're going to have pain. You're going to have suffering. You're going to have a lot of issues that you didn't want to have, and I didn't want to give you. But this is the way things are going to be from now on. So we live in that world where things happen. Now, the first thing that comes to mind when you get into some problem, what is the first thing, or a lot of us think of? What's some of the questions you're asking yourself if you're in the middle of something that's just wearing you out? What's one of the first things that comes to mind? Why is God letting this happen to me? Why me? For one thing. Maybe our own fault. Sometimes there's ramifications for certain things we do. You know, if I drink a fifth of whiskey and go jump in my car, there's going to be some ramifications for that immoral activity, right? I'm going to kill someone, or I'm going to kill myself, or I'm going to injure someone seriously. Now, there's sometimes we may be driving down the road and somebody else drunk a fifth of whiskey and hit me head on and killed me. It wasn't anything I did, but it's something they did, right? So there's ramifications for things that happen in this world, but we often wonder, why did this happen to me? Why is this happening to me right now? What is the problem? What else? Why me? Why this? I put down, why this? Why is this happening where it could be something else, easier? How do I get out of this? You know, I think as men we start trying to figure that. I kind of really analyze stuff, and I think I can figure out how to get out of this situation. And sometimes there's no way of getting out of it. You've got to go through it. There's no exit, right? You're on a certain path, and when certain things fall into place, that's just the way things are going to be, and we got to deal with them the way they are. Now, the question we want to think about is that when we're dealing with issues in life and trials and problems, Is there a purpose for all this? Is there a purpose? Okay, when we get through it, we are what? Stronger, aren't we? And we're going to discuss a little bit about that. Now, sometimes when we're in the middle of it, we're like, this ain't helping me any, is it? This is not helping me at all. Right. It is a matter of getting through something, and it proves yourself, don't it? And we're going to talk about some of those things as we go. Y'all been looking at my notes, haven't you? Okay. We can, looking at our trials, saying, what can I learn from this? How can I be stronger? How can I be better? What am I supposed to be accomplishing here? What can make me better as we go through this? Now, we're going to look at, let's get over to 2 Corinthians chapter 3. So when we start looking at what is the purpose of trials, trials are there to test us and refine us. We're going to kind of get off into the refining ideas here in a minute. We're talking about refining things. And it transforms us. In 2 Corinthians chapter 3, verse 18, it says, "But we all, with unveiled face, beholding as in a manner the glory of the Lord, are being transformed into the same image from glory to glory, just as by the Spirit of the Lord." So I want us to look at that. We're being transformed into what God wants us to be. And a lot of times we're not what God wants us to be, and trials can get us there. Issues in life can get us there. Now, trials can also do what? You know, the Bible wants us, we're going to learn that the Bible tells us when you got something bad going on, as many of you guys have said, let's look at this and see what we can learn from it. But what do trials a lot of times do to us?
One thing is they force us to depend on God and stop looking at ourselves.
Okay, that's on the positive side. You said it forces us to rely on God. That's good. Let's go to the negative side. What? It sets you back. And that's a real simple term to mean a lot of things, doesn't it? I mean, a setback, a lot of times when we're dealing with hard issues in life, a setback is a set way back, isn't it? I mean, that we're talking about faith losing, soul losing setbacks, aren't we? Because you know, everybody in here knows of somebody, if you've been around church life very long, you know of somebody who went through something and they're where? They're gone. And it is a hard thing to know and to see someone who faces an issue and then they lose their faith, they lose their soul over an issue in this life. And, you know, life is short and eternity is long, isn't it? Life is short and eternity is long. And we take life and we take something that's on us right now and we lose the prize. We lose the long for the benefit, or for the trials in the short term. But that's easy to say when you're in the middle, when you're on the other side, isn't it? But when you're in the middle of it, it's hard, isn't it? So, it says here that we're supposed to be transformed. Now, I remember talking to the kids about this, and, you know, what's the big movie the kids like to go see? Transformers, right? You know, if y'all know anything about popular movies and stuff, Transformers are these robots, and they turn into trucks and cars and all this kind of stuff, and they battle the bad, the aliens and all that kind of stuff. Well, the idea of transforming is that you're changing from one form to another. So if we're trying to transform, we're trying to change from what to what? If God wants us to transform, what's He wanting us to do? Carnal to spiritual. That's a good sum up of it right there. Thinking about worldly things to thinking about spiritual things, right? So when we're looking at these things, we got to feel like we need to take whatever we're dealing with, whether it's good or whether it's bad, and transform us into a better place. And we might not even see the end of whatever we're dealing with. Have you ever seen, I think Janine used to work for Scottish Rite Hospital. Well, if you know anything about Scottish Rite Hospital, there's kids coming through there that are, it is heart-rending to see the kids coming through there dealing with things that we can't even imagine. We're sitting here, sitting up straight and talking and hearing, and you see kids coming through there with issues that will just boggle your mind. And she did pretty good most days, but some days she'd come in and it just tear her up, And she didn't talk about it a lot, but some days she'd talk about it. And there's a great reward to working in that type of situation. But you also see very terrible things. Now, what about somebody you think, well, we may never get through whatever we're dealing with. These kids are dealing with something from the moment they're born till the moment they pass, something we can't even fathom. So that is a trial of lifelong, isn't it? We deal with trials sometimes months at a time, days at a time, years at a time. But there are people who deal with trials their whole life. So, we may step off into eternity still dealing with whatever we're dealing with, mightn't we? And that's a hard thing to think about, thinking that I'm taking whatever I'm dealing with right now, I'm going to die with this. But can that still transform us to the spiritual? Maybe even greater than the temporary trials, mightn't it? If you're dealing with something constantly, it can make you that much better. Now, we don't want to think like that in a lot of ways. We don't want to, I needed this to get me to where I need to be. But sometimes we may step off into eternity dealing with that same issue. And that's a sad thing in some ways, if the reward is there, is that not a minor thing? And that's the way we got to look at things. If we've been transformed through the process, when we step off into eternity, what does the Bible teach us? That the trials of this life are like nothing, right? So don't trade the short term for the long term. And that's kind of an investing advice, isn't it? Don't mess up the short term for the long term benefits. So if we're going to do that, we need to be transformed by whatever we're dealing with. Now we're going to get into refining. Now, I'm not a metallurgist. How do you say that? A metallurgist. Yeah. Okay. I'm not one of those. Can't even say it. Okay. But what happens when you're dealing with refining steel and metal, and the Bible references this a lot. It talks about silver and gold, and what do you call that when you heat it up? Refining, right? You're refining it. You're making it finer, aren't you? So when the Bible talks about that, it is a perfect analogy, and the Bible is a book of perfect analogies, isn't it? I mean, you just look at his parables and the things he talked about Christ, and then you think about the Bible and all the things that you can read and understand in the Bible. It has some of the best analogies he's the king of analogies, isn't he? So he makes these things where we can understand and know what he's talking about. Removing the impurities, and that's what we're going to talk about in just a second. When you're refining, any of you guys that know anything about refining, if you heat this up and the impurities come to the top, right? If you ever watched a documentary on that kind of stuff. But what is that called that comes to the top? What's the word for that? It's impurities, but what do they call that? What? Dross. That's the word I was looking at. I think in steel, it's called slag, I think. So when you heat this stuff up, this silver and this gold or whatever you're refining, and this stuff starts bubbling up to the top, it separates from what you want. So the dross, there's a song we sing about dross, isn't it? What is that song? I got a mind like a steel trap. Keep slamming on me all the But there's a song that we sing that mentions, removing the dross, right? And that's a reference to refining. It's a reference of, hey, whatever I'm going through, it's heating me up right now. I'm getting kind of uncomfortable here, but it kind of brings it to the top, doesn't it? And so if whatever you're dealing with brings out the impurity, what happened if you don't have a spiritual mindset and you are not trying to learn from what you're dealing with? What happens to the negative side? When you get heated up, it doesn't refine you. It can actually make you bitter and upset and cause other spiritual issues. But let's look over at one question. When we're talking, yes. How firm a foundation. Okay, that's the song. Mentions the word removing the dross. The poetics of songwriters are really good sometimes. Mentions the dross, removing the dross, getting rid of it. Now, when you're doing a refining process, what kind of heat is required to get that done? Is it just like a medium heat on your stove or whatever? We're just going to let this simmer a little bit, right? No. It's extreme, isn't it? Now, so it takes a lot of heat sometimes to remove impurities from gold and silver and steel. If you've ever seen, like say, some of these shows when they're refining iron and steel and stuff like that, I mean, there's a lot of dangerous things going on in those plants. And I mean, you see them dumping in sparks flying everywhere, and they're not out there in their bathing suits working on that stuff, are they? They're geared up, got their flame retardant clothes on, and all those kind of things. So it takes a lot of heat to get it to where it needs to be to take care of these impurities. Let's look over at 2 Chronicles real quick. This is a good, when we start talking about 2 Chronicles chapter 29 in verse 17. Now this is David speaking here. Of course, David went through some fiery trials of his own. Some of those brought on by himself, of course, as we know. But in 1 Chronicles 29:17, it says, I know also, my God, that you test the heart and have pleasure in uprightness. As for me, in the uprightness of my heart, I have willingly offered all these things, and now with joy I have seen your people. And we'll stop right there, but what is the idea there? God says we're going to be tested, and He has pleasure in what? What's the word? Do y'all have any other versions?
What verse did you say?
1 Chronicles 29:17. He has pleasure, He tests us, but He has pleasure in what? Uprightness. So He's tying this together, isn't He? He says, I'm going to test. Sometimes tests come, but I have pleasure in uprightness. What is that? What other word would you use for uprightness? If you think of somebody that's upright, what version do we have up there? Integrity, good. I found one of the versions had integrity written in there. So in other words, if God says, you know what, tests are going to come. David says, I know you're going to test me and that you have pleasure. Now, we should want to please God, shouldn't we? We know that you have pleasure in uprightness and integrity. And sometimes the test is what brings out whether we have integrity, doesn't it? And sometimes the test determines whether we're upright or not. Because when the test comes, sometimes we're, just like we talked about earlier, we're gone. Some little test comes up and we're out. Some little test comes and we're on to the next thing. So He has pleasure in integrity. Now, when you think about, well, without the test, how do you prove integrity? Without the test, how do you prove uprightness? In an industrial situation, when you have a part, and I know because Cole's an engineering guy, You know, when you have a part and you design something, what do these people that build things, what do they do sometimes? They make a model of it, but they can make the actual part, and then what do they go do with it? They test it, don't they? They had an issue with a part that was failing a while back where he works, so they had to start testing this thing again. So what they do is they take this part and they put it in, I've seen parts put in like a press, you know, and you put it under 30 tons of pressure or whatever that part requires to be tested, and it is put under some tension. And then they sit there and they watch their gauges and they say, okay, pow, it pops. Okay, it broke. Okay, well, it broke it so many pounds of pressure higher than what we had to get there. So what? That part passed the test. But if they were to just not even test that part, just say, oh no, just keep it going, keep shipping it. And then the company's buying them and they're going, these parts are failing. You know, we got tires running off cars out here. We got, you know, buildings falling over. We got all kinds of issues. Did y'all test the part? Well, no, we didn't test. That's for wimps. So we got money to make. We got to ship this stuff. Okay. So what did the test? Then they could go back and say, well, let's test that part and see if it has integrity, right? Structural integrity. Does not the Bible teach us that if we're going to put under a little bit of pressure, what's that going to show? It's going to show our integrity or our uprightness. Without the test, integrity is not assured, is it? It's just something we talk about. Oh yeah, I got integrity. Well, you don't pass the test. So, are you upright? Oh yeah, I'm upright. Well, the test comes along and I fail. That's when the rubber meets the road, so to speak, right? The test is what proves us. Now, we're going to go into silversmith. Yes, Matt.
Before we go on, I was going to say, when you lift weights, it actually carries your muscle, and your muscle has to regrow, and then you can lift more weights.
Very good example.
So I think it's the same way, we might not be able to handle a large trial, but maybe we can handle a little one.
And who knows what we can handle? God knows what we can. He's making the example of it. When you lift weights, you actually injure yourself a little bit. You tear a muscle a little bit, but what happens is when that thing grows back, it's a little stronger. So the old saying, no pain, no gain, that's an overused metaphor. No pain, no gain. You've heard that a million times, but isn't it true? I mean, so when you go through pain, there is a gain. As you come out the other side, as has been mentioned, you get better, you get stronger. And he said a small trial, I might can handle a small trial, but I can't handle that big one yet. But a few of these small ones can get me ready for that one, can't they?
When you don't go through trials and tests and tearing the muscles down, whatever, you get weaker. They get weaker as they go along without those.
Another example, he said that if you don't work that out and don't work, you get weaker. Not only do you not get stronger, you get weaker. And isn't that important for a Christian? That if we're not working our muscles out, and I'm not saying working out, I'm talking about working out. You come in, you're a Christian, you're studying, you're doing your thing, and you're saying, I'm growing. And then if you don't keep doing that, what do? What is it called when you don't use a muscle for a long time? Atrophy, isn't it? Okay, so we can get atrophy in our spiritual muscles if we're not working them. And preparing for classes when I was teaching the kids and stuff, I taught Sunday morning and Wednesday night for, 10 years or ever how long it was. But you know what? I was always having to prepare for the next thing. Well, that was good for me. And since I've got away from that, I still do my normal study, but sometimes I'm not trying to go a certain direction and try to put together thoughts that go in a certain way. And it's something it can be a lost skill. I mean, you ladies that have taught Bible class, it makes you work to be better because I need to get this down where I can present it, or I can at least make some sense. I may not be making any sense, but anyway. But we have to work in that direction, don't we? So pushing yourself to be better keeps you from turning into atrophy, spiritual atrophy. We got to work and keep working if we're going to make ourselves better. Right. He's saying that if, actually reading something that tells you how to do something is different than doing it, isn't it? And we may read in the Bible tells us, hey, you need to handle things a certain way. But if we don't ever do it, we haven't accomplished anything, have we? We know what the manual says, but we have never put it into practice. It's kind of like, I keep bringing up Cole and I. Cole and I have been working on this old truck for, turns out it was 6 years now, nearly 6.5 years, and we pulled it out of the shed yesterday under its own power. So it was a big day. But you know what? You can get on YouTube and learn how to rebuild a car from the ground up and learn how to do all these great things. But if you don't ever go out to the shop and actually start hammering on it and beating on it and smoothing it out and all that kind of stuff, you won't ever. There's a learning process in there. Same way with our spiritual muscles. If we're not engaging in activities that will help us be better, we're not going to be better. And this is something I thought about a few years ago. You always hear this statement. This is kind of on the side, but you hear this statement, well, I'm going to live my life. I'm just going to be a good example. I want to be a good example. Well, that's a noble thing, isn't it? Being a good example is awesome, but sometimes that's our whole goal, is I'm just not going to do anything that I'm going to mess up. And I'm going to be here all the time. But what does God want us to do? He don't want us just to be a good example. He does, but what does He want us to do in that example? He wants us to be an example of working too, right? Not just not messing up, but He wants us to be an example of, hey, I went and did that. I did that. I went and did that. I spoke to somebody about this. I took a chance to talk to my coworker about the gospel. And those are uncomfortable situations. And sometimes those are the trials we got to deal with, is stepping out and saying, I got to talk to that guy at work because he's going to lose his soul if I don't talk to him. So, and I'm his only shot. Do y'all know anybody in your life that you're the only shot they got? You probably do, because we all do, don't we? You're the only shot they got of ever being pleasing to God or ever going to heaven or anything. You're the only shot they got. So the example we need to be setting is, I need to talk to them. I don't need to just, I'm going to be the perfect example for them. I'm not going to throw down, cussing and carrying on at work. I'm not going to be out, doing carousing and doing all these kind of things. I'm going to be this good example for them. But sometimes the example is you got to talk to them. Somebody had their hand up. Yes.
I've always wondered what would happen if the disciples had just been good examples and not actually studied with people. Where would the church have been?
Good example there. She said that, wonder what the apostles would have been like if they had just been good examples. What we say, good examples. Well, when I'm out fishing, I'm not cussing because I didn't catch anything. Well, no, they were doing things, and it doesn't mean we have to convert the world, so to speak, and stand on the corner. But we are the person, the contact that somebody needs to have, and living example, an example of a working example.
I don't think you can be a good example.
Right. Exactly. Example of good things and not just not doing the bad things. So, when we get back to our heating, yes?
I think the faith shows. It doesn't end up, during the stress. It doesn't work. If the apostles hadn't been through, the church would have fallen apart after Jesus died.
Exactly.
They struggled to get the word out, but if they hadn't gone through and not
Exactly right. And I think that's one of the reasons why we realize that the apostles and the gospel is true and that Christ is true is because of the things they went through after Christ's death. If you want to look at one of the proofs of biblical history and who Christ was, when Christ died and left this earth, what did the apostles do? Did they say, oh, well, he's dead? No. It spurred them to incredible things. And when you know the truth about something, as the apostles did, it spurred them to incredible things. And that's kind of what we need. We need to be able to get spurred to those incredible things. And the incredible thing may be only saving one person. If you save one person, is that an incredible thing to them? That's a pretty incredible thing. I mean, at the end of time, they're going to be going, I'm so thankful. What an incredible thing you did for me.
There's examples where one lady converted one person, and that one person now converted thousands and thousands.
We don't know the results of what we're doing. He's saying there's examples of one person converting one person, and that person converting someone else, and that person went on to convert hundreds or thousands. You know, what does God say? God says plant, right? We're just supposed to try to plant. And He'll, the watering and the growing will come from Him, won't it? So let's plant and let Him deal with that. You know, when we plant seeds in people a lot of times and they don't do anything with it, do they? But what is that proof of? If we planted the seed, they rejected the seed, that's on them, isn't it? That's not on us. We've done what we could to try to help who we could. When we start talking about heat and putting this heat to this thing, on a silversmith, when you're refining silver, you put it up to, like we talked about, super high temperature. Okay, you put it up there real hot. Then you kind of get the stuff off the top, the dross. Okay, you get that off the top. Then what do they typically do it again? If they want to really purify, what do they do it again? They ramp it up again. And there's a skill to that, isn't there? I mean, I don't quite understand all of it, but there's a certain way they watch it. And they say, okay, well here, this dross is coming up, here's some impurities coming out. Get that out of there, okay? Then they heat it up again. Let's get a little more out of there. And you know, if you buy silver coins or gold coins, what do they have on the front of them a lot of times? It's the purity, right? And what do they say a lot of times on coins and other stuff like that? They'll say 0.9999. I think it's 4 nines. Isn't that about as good as it gets? I don't know, 3 or 4 of them. But that means that coin or that silver or that gold is refined to its highest point. And that got as much of that out of there as they can. And that's what God wants us to be, doesn't He? Now, we're never going to be 0.9999% pure. We can maybe get closer than we think. You know, a lot of times we make that excuse when we're slipping and falling and stumbling around. I'm just human. Instead of saying, I can do better than that, I messed up again. Oh, well, it's just me. And that's the way the world looks at things sometimes, isn't it? Instead of saying, I can do better than this. This is ridiculous. And this is not, it's like that tree. They could do better than that, couldn't they? And we can do better than what we do sometimes. We just don't apply ourselves. You ever heard that in school? You bad students in school. Did you ever hear that? You just need to apply yourself better, right? Roger probably told that to some guys, didn't you? I don't know if I ever heard that. I might have heard that before. You need to apply yourself. I don't remember. It's been so long ago. But what? We need to apply ourselves better when we get into that. We're already out of time.
That's like lifting weights, whatever. You lift weights, and you say, just one more.
Just one more, lifting weights. He's saying, that's when you really get stronger in it. When you say, I'm going to go one more rep, okay? I'm going to run just a little bit further today, and tomorrow I'll be able to make that. Pushing it. I guess we're out of time. I appreciate all your input. We didn't get really all into the crucible and all that kind of stuff, but we will another time maybe.